Hey, listen, first things first, congratulations on the album.
Thank you.
Are you happy with it?
Very happy. It was really fun to make. I didn't think it'd be like that day because I didn't know that many people like singing.
Exactly.
He walked onto one of the biggest stages in the world with a voice so pure it seemed to stop time itself. The lights were bright, the audience was silent, and millions would soon be watching from home. At just 13 years old, Malakai Bayoh appeared calm, almost unaware of how deeply his life was about to change. But behind the applause, behind the standing ovations and golden confetti, a much heavier story was quietly unfolding. This is not just the story of a gifted child singer. This is the story of pressure, expectation, loss of innocence, and the hidden cost of fame. This is the heartbreaking tragedy of Malakai Bayoh. Malakai Bayoh was born in 2010 in London, a city known for its diversity, creativity, and unforgiving pace. From the very beginning, his life was surrounded by sound. Music wasn't something he discovered later. It was something that seemed to discover him. Raised in a modest household, Malakai grew up far from luxury or industry connections. His family lived simply, but their home was rich in culture, warmth, and music. His parents, originally from Sierra Leone, carried with them a deep respect for tradition, rhythm, and storytelling through song. From an early age, Malakai showed signs that something about him was different. While other children sang casually, Malakai sang with intention. There was emotion in his voice that didn't match his years, something deeper, almost haunting. Family members noticed it first, then teachers, then strangers. Music wasn't just a hobby for him, it was instinct. At just 7 years old, Malakai joined the choir at St. George's Church in South London. What might have seemed like a simple extracurricular activity quickly became the foundation of his life. Under the guidance of experienced mentors, Malakai's voice began to transform. Choir rehearsals were demanding, discipline was strict, precision mattered. But Malakai thrived in that environment. He learned how to control his breath, how to shape emotion through sound, how silence could be just as powerful as a note. More importantly, the choir gave him structure. It taught him patience, teamwork, and resilience, qualities that would soon be tested far beyond anything a child should face. Performing in front of crowds became normal. The fear that cripples many performers never seemed to touch him. Instead, Malakai appeared most alive when he was singing. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. It happened during a school Christmas event, an ordinary celebration meant for parents and classmates. Malakai was selected to sing a solo. The song was "O Holy Night." As soon as he began, the room fell silent. Teachers exchanged glances, parents froze, children stopped whispering. His voice filled the hall with a depth and purity that felt impossible for someone so young. Someone recorded it. That video didn't just circulate, it exploded. Within days, it had been shared across social media platforms, accumulating millions of views. People around the world were asking the same question: how is this child real? Messages flooded in. Praise poured out. Media outlets began reaching out. Suddenly, Malakai Bayoh was no longer just a talented schoolboy. He was viral. The attention was overwhelming, but also intoxicating. Encouraged by the response and guided by hopeful dreams, Malakai's family faced a decision that would change their lives forever. Should they protect him from the spotlight, or let him chase something extraordinary? In 2022, they chose to take the leap. Malakai auditioned for Britain's Got Talent. For Malakai, it wasn't about fame. It was about singing, about sharing something pure with the world. But the stage he was stepping onto was far bigger and far more dangerous than he could imagine. Backstage at Britain's Got Talent, the energy was electric. Contestants paced nervously. Parents whispered encouragement. Cameras captured every emotion. Malakai stood quietly among them. By his side were the two people who grounded him most: his mother, his strongest supporter, and his sister, his constant source of reassurance. They knew how special his voice was, but they also knew how young he was. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage with calm confidence. The crowd murmured softly, unsure what to expect. Standing before the judges, Simon Cowell, Amanda Holden, Alicia Dixon, and Bruno Tonioli, Malakai introduced himself politely, his voice steady. Then he announced his song, Pai Jesu. A bold choice, a dangerous choice, a piece that required flawless technique and emotional maturity, rarely found in adults, let alone a child. From the very first note, everything changed. The theater fell completely silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. Malakai's voice floated effortlessly through the air, pure, controlled, and achingly emotional. He didn't just sing the notes, he lived them. As he climbed higher, his voice remained steady, powerful, almost unreal. By the time he reached the final note, people were holding their breath. And when it ended, the room exploded. The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Judges stared in disbelief. Some smiled. Others shook their heads, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Simon Cowell leaned forward. He didn't criticize. He didn't question. He praised. Moments later, he reached for the golden buzzer. As gold confetti rained from the ceiling, Malakai stood frozen in shock. Tears streamed down his face as he realized what had just happened. He had gone straight through to the live shows. Backstage, he collapsed into his family's arms, overwhelmed with emotion. It was a moment of joy, pride, and disbelief. But what no one could see, what no camera could capture, was the weight that instantly settled on his shoulders. Because the golden buzzer doesn't just bring opportunity, it brings expectation. Overnight, Malakai was no longer just a contestant. He was labeled a favorite, a future star, a once-in-a-generation talent. Social media exploded with praise, but also scrutiny. Every note he sang would now be judged more harshly. Every appearance would be analyzed. Every mistake magnified. And Malakai was still just a child. The pressure began quietly. Rehearsals intensified. Schedules tightened. Interviews increased. The fun of singing slowly transformed into obligation. People expected perfection, but perfection has a price. For the semi-finals, Malakai made another daring choice. O mio babino caro, an operatic piece loaded with emotional weight and technical difficulty. It demanded absolute control, deep storytelling, and maturity far beyond his years. Training became relentless. Vocal coaches pushed him to refine every detail: breath support, tone clarity, emotional phrasing. Stage coaches worked on posture, expression, and presence. Days blurred into nights. School, rehearsals, performances, everything revolved around one goal: winning. But somewhere in that process, something fragile began to crack. Behind the scenes, the pressure mounted. The expectations grew heavier. and the carefree joy that once defined Malakai's singing began to fade. He smiled on stage. He performed beautifully. He made the world proud. But inside, the cost was starting to show. And this was only the beginning. The applause never stopped. The praise never slowed. But the silence behind the scenes grew louder with every performance. For the world, Malakai Bayoh was living a dream. For Malakai himself, the dream was becoming complicated. After the golden buzzer moment, Malakai's life changed almost overnight. His face was everywhere. Television screens, social media feeds, news articles. Strangers spoke about him as if they knew him personally. Industry professionals began using words like destined, legendary, and future icon. But Malakai was still a child. Behind the glowing praise was a schedule that left little room for rest. Long rehearsals replaced free afternoons. Vocal warm-ups replaced playtime. Expectations followed him everywhere, even home. There was no switch to turn it off. And slowly, the joy that once made singing feel effortless began to feel heavy. With every rehearsal, the pressure intensified. Coaches wanted him better. Producers wanted him bigger. Audiences wanted him perfect. But perfection is not natural, especially for someone still growing. Malakai began to feel the fear of disappointing others, not failing the judges, not missing a note, not letting down the millions who now believed in him. Each performance carried invisible stakes. He still smiled. He still delivered powerful vocals. But the emotional cost was quietly accumulating. This was the part of fame no one applauded. When semi-final night arrived, Malakai stepped onto the stage once again, dressed elegantly, composed on the outside. The orchestra began, and the opening notes of O Mio Babino Caro filled the theater. Technically, the performance was stunning. His voice soared with control and precision. He delivered the piece with grace far beyond his age. The audience listened in awe, swept away by the beauty of the moment. But something was different. Those who watched closely could sense it. Not a flaw, not a mistake, but a shift. The performance felt heavier, more restrained, as if the song carried more than music. It carried pressure. When the applause came, it was loud. The judges praised him once again. But behind the curtain, Malakai didn't celebrate the same way. He looked tired. As the competition progressed, public opinion became louder and more divided. Praise remained strong, but criticism began to surface too. Some questioned whether the pressure was too much. Others debated whether a child should carry such emotional material. Social media, once a place of encouragement, became unpredictable. And Malakai saw more than he should have. Comments, opinions, expectations, comparisons. All things a child should never have to process alone. His world had grown too fast. Away from cameras, Malakai struggled with exhaustion, not just physical, but emotional. Singing had once been a safe place, a way to express feelings. Now it felt like a responsibility. Every note mattered, every performance was judged, every emotion was analyzed. The simplicity of loving music was fading. Family members noticed the change. He was quieter, more withdrawn, less carefree. The boy who once sang for joy now carried the burden of being extraordinary. And that burden was heavy. When Malakai's journey on Britain's Got Talent came to an end, The applause didn't vanish, but the structure did. The cameras moved on. The audience shifted focus. The schedule that once consumed him suddenly stopped. And for the first time in months, there was silence. For many young performers, this is the hardest part. The sudden contrast between constant attention and quiet normality can feel like falling from a great height. The adrenaline fades, the expectations linger, and questions begin to surface. Who am I without the stage? Was I good enough? What happens next? For Malakai, these questions came earlier than they should have. Returning to everyday life wasn't simple. He was no longer just Malakai, the boy from London who loved to sing. He was that kid, the one from television, the golden buzzer child. Teachers treated him differently. Strangers recognized him. People expected brilliance at all times. There was no room to simply be average. No space to make mistakes. No permission to just grow. And growth, especially at his age, is messy. Being called a prodigy sounds beautiful, but it comes with an invisible price. Gifted children are often expected to mature faster, feel deeper, perform stronger. But emotionally, they are still children navigating confusion, fear, and identity. Malakai's voice carried emotions many adults struggle to express. Yet he himself was still learning how to understand those emotions. The disconnect was painful. Singing about heartbreak, longing, and desperation required him to touch feelings he had not yet lived, and doing so repeatedly began to take a toll. This is where the real tragedy lies. Not in losing, not in criticism, not in fading fame, but in the weight placed on a child too early. Malakai Bayoh didn't suffer because he lacked talent. He suffered because the world expected too much, too soon. His story isn't about a voice that failed. It's about innocence challenged by expectation. Today, Malakai's journey is still unfolding. He continues to train, to grow, and to rediscover music at his own pace. Away from the relentless spotlight, he has space to breathe, to be a child again. And that space matters, because true greatness isn't rushed. True artistry takes time, and healing comes before success. Malakai Bayoh's story is not a warning against talent shows. It is a reminder that behind every viral moment is a human being. Behind every standing ovation is pressure, and behind every gifted child is a heart still learning how to carry the world. If nurtured with patience, Malakai's voice could shape generations, but only if his well-being comes first. The tragedy of Malakai Bayoh is not written in headlines or results. It's written in the quiet moments, in the expectations no one sees, in the childhood that must be protected, not consumed. His voice moved millions. Now, the world must learn how to protect the soul behind it.